3, 2, 1. Welcome to The Sounding. We aim to provide sexual trauma survivors with a path to healing in order to tell their stories. We always like to start with a disclaimer to let you guys know that while we are experts in our own lived experiences, we are not therapists, lawyers, doctors. We're just here sharing, again, from our own experiences in hopes that it helps you along your way. So thank you for tuning in today.
Yes, and while we have your attention, please like, subscribe, share. We're really excited about the feedback we've been getting, so if you guys can continue to support us in that way, that would be amazing. Today we are here to talk about trauma responses, specifically the big 5 F's of trauma responses, and I'll let Shay get into the details of what those 5 F's are.
So, I was like, thank you, Dina.
Right.
I felt like a reporter. So, I don't know if you can see in the camera right now, but I'm petting a dog, so if my movement's weird, there's little Gigi right here, emotional support animals.
Emotional support.
Yes.
Many of them in this house.
Yes. You'll probably see a little cat running across.
Right. That was part of the healing that went on in this house as it became a mini zoo. So, and that's okay. We love our fur babies.
Yes. So with the 5 F's, we have trauma responses, right? And if you were to go on Google and Google what are the trauma responses, you're gonna run into people explaining the same things in different ways. So for keeping it organized here within the sounding, we are just going to call it the 5 F's, if that makes sense. And the reason why we're calling it the 5 F's is because that's just, they all end up starting with the letter F, which is really nice. So the way that I'm going to explain it is almost like a system of response. Not to say that everyone responds in this order every time, and not to say that this is how you should be responding, or that these are good or bad ways to respond. Is that
That
clear?
just makes sense. And I want to say before you get into it, like trauma responses. So it could be a trauma that's happening right now, or it could be something that's reminiscent of a trauma that happened in the past. And so your body reacts in the way that it did during that initial trauma. So trauma responses are kind of all over the board.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. That's a great preface to what we're about to talk about. So first, let's pretend you're in a stressful situation, okay? We have these 5 F's of a response. The first one we're going to talk about is friend. You're in a stressful situation. You're going to pick up your phone and try and call your friend or your family, a loved one, right? That's your first response. Go to your community. That's like a normal, I shouldn't say normal, but everybody can probably think of a time where that was your first response, to call a friend and see what they would say or how they can help, right? If you can't get a hold of your friend, they don't pick up the phone, then we move to the next F, which is fight, right? Then you are now making that decision, okay, I'm going to stand up for myself and I'm going to have to fight, right? If that doesn't work, or you decide not to do that, and again, this isn't necessarily the order, right? But I'm just telling a story so that we can picture these responses and apply them to our own situations, our own life. Your friend doesn't answer, fighting isn't working, you're going to run. You're going to flight. So friend, fight, flight, you're going to run away from the threat. If that doesn't work, then you're going to freeze. So number 4F is freeze. And that's where your body literally just doesn't move. It doesn't do, you could be in your head saying run or fight or call your friend, but you're just frozen. And very intelligent responses, all of these need to express that. Again, it's not right or wrong, good or bad. The body is highly intelligent. So there's respect here with these responses. And that's why we need to talk about them and become aware. And then, so the last the last of the 5 F's is fawn. And that's where we then people please and we just kind of give in, right? It's different than freeze, where freeze often everything shuts down and you're not even able to communicate. Fawning is where you're almost like, yes, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, right? Just doing whatever. So, friend, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Those are the 5 trauma responses that you're typically going to see when you are either, like Dina said, you have past trauma and you're now responding to your present relationships based off of that, or you're in an immediate stressful traumatic situation.
Right. And I think, it's really easy if we compare them to the animal kingdom. For instance, deer. Like, we all know that a deer gets frozen in the headlights or will bolt in front of a car or fights another deer. So they're really common to think about that way, but I don't think we really take the time to think about how instinctual we are, and some of these responses are, in fact, instincts. And once you've been groomed, because we always like to come back to that as survivors, that you may just have really very comfortable relationships with these responses and not even realize you're doing them. Like, I like to say, I'm a fawner from way back.
Well, and yeah, it makes me think of, too, that we're not aware, it's instinctual, and, oh man, how do I feel like my train of thought is here, but then it went away. Hold on, let me gather what I was going to say. There we go. When you are in an immediate stressful situation, you're in fight or flight. You're not accessing the prefrontal cortex where you are able to choose which response you want to have.
Right.
And that's why it's important to become aware of the fact that we have these different responses when we're not aware, right?
Right.
So this is what that means. We're in our fight or flight nervous system, and these are the responses that we have to choose from, unless we access our breath, settle our system, and gain that connection back to our prefrontal cortex where we can make those high-functioning decisions that include empathy in them.
Yeah. And understanding that some situations that once felt dangerous aren't necessarily dangerous anymore. Like now, things that I used to fawn over or freeze over, I'm now finding my voice in. Like, I can't believe how many, and I think we've had this experience several times, including last night, like how many times I've allowed men to touch me, like touch my hands, touch my body, and I have frozen and not been able to say anything. And I'm finding not only my voice, but just like it's fascinating to sit back and be like, oh wow, like my body is responding one way and my brain is responding another way. And I love Joe Dispenza, and he talks a lot about that mind-body connection. And that's a lot of what we're talking about, is your mind may understand what's going on, but your body is still going to respond in the way that it's used to responding. And so as you start getting those two connected through meditation and breath and mindfulness, you start to get this coherence between the two. And that's when like the real beautiful healing happens, because you're no longer responding instinctually. You're really able to be present.
Not responding in a pattern way because you're present.
You're present. And presence is really what it comes down to, is living in the right now moment. And I think that comes back to the friend thing too. Like, that's a beautiful thing. Friends and family and support. But also we have to be a little cautious or curious about codependency through healing. Because it is really easy sometimes to just pick up the phone. And if you're picking up the phone and you're talking about the same thing with the same person over and over and over again, then change isn't going to happen. Like, I had friends in the past where we would literally just like beat a dead horse about the same thing over and over and over again. And then through the healing, when people left and I found myself alone, and it was this beautiful place of like, ooh, I don't have anybody to call right now. And I would sit with it. And that's when like the real dark, not even dark, but shadow work and thoughts about like, why do you respond? And why do you need somebody to tell you that it's okay? Like, you have to start trusting yourself, allowing your inner child to come out and feel safe and make some decisions, and then understand like, oh, I didn't make that decision. I hope you're okay with me telling the story. But during
we'll see.
During Shay's trial at the very end, when we were waiting for a verdict, there was a time where the jury didn't come back, and we thought it was going to. It was the end of the week. It was exhausting. We knew we were going into a weekend of not knowing. And that's when faith really went out the window for Shay in that particular moment. And she became very childlike. I'm even tearing up thinking about it. Like, she just, her feet weren't moving, and she was like, nobody believes me, because we couldn't understand why the jury wasn't coming back so quickly. And I remember, like, I took one of her arms over my shoulders, and her husband took her other, and we literally just dragged her tippy toes scraping out. And I thought to myself in that moment, like, this is Shay's inner child. This is her feeling lost and scared and not knowing what to do. And it was so beautiful to see it, and we were there to support you, but also so sad that, like, wow.
I know.
I remember we get tissue.
It's emotional, because when we're talking about an immediate stressful situation, it is really hard to access.
It is.
Your prefrontal cortex to be able, for me in this situation that has made us so emotional, it was very hard for me to take a breath and gather myself. I couldn't.
Yeah.
And, I think it's okay, though, because that's where we're able to see the good piece of the friend come in, right?
Right. And knowing that it's okay. But I think about the times where I had those childlike responses, even as a mother. Like, I'm embarrassed sometimes, like, where you would have a temper tantrum or you're screaming, and then you're like, what was all of that about? And now looking back on situations, I see them differently, and so I have more compassion towards myself, and more forgiveness. Like, oh, that was my inner child. And the safer I feel within my body and my brain and my, and understanding the trauma responses and being vulnerable and having friends that are there and also understand, like, the more healing that happens, the safer it gets. So the trauma responses aren't necessarily a bad thing. They can save your life.
Yes. They're, like I said, you'll hear most trauma experts explain these responses as being intelligent. They really are. In the heat of the moment, whether the stress is real and there or not, the body is just trying to do its job and protect us.
Right.
And again, that's where we get to take ownership and accountability and thank our body and befriend our body, so that we can connect our mind and body to be moving from a truer space of ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so,
sorry, it just made me think of this idea of the breath, right? We have an inhale and an exhale, and there's a space between the inhale and the exhale, and between the exhale and the inhale.
Right.
Stimulus, response. Can we rest in that space between so that we can then choose how we want to react rather than respond, right?
Yeah. And also, understanding that this doesn't happen overnight, especially if you've had, like, a lot of trauma. Like, I just recently went to a meditation retreat and was in a very outdoor meditative state, like, felt safe, and was with a friend that also was going through the healing process. And we know that we're very trauma informed, and we understand responses. And we had somebody at the retreat come up and sit next to us and literally started rubbing on my leg. And my mind was like, tell this man to stop doing this. But my body, that has been groomed to accept sexual abuse, was not able to respond. And so I'm sitting there as a grown woman knowing that I'm aware of what's happening, but I'm still not able to get the proper response. And so it took me a day or two to really forgive myself and to understand, like, my inner child was mad that I didn't protect it. And then I'm like, why didn't I protect myself? Like, why didn't I say, don't touch me? But it was such a normal response as a groomed person that's in the midst of healing still.
Side note, society, media does not help
No.
either. Whether you've been sexually traumatized or not, right? Like we're also, as women, we are super conditioned to take touch from men and and smile when they tell us to smile walking down the street, right?
Yes. So, or just be like, oh, so
there's
excited.
A lot going on
there's
right there.
And that's our next video, actually.
Right,
so
right.
Stay tuned for that one.
Right.
But yeah, so...
And one more thing, it just made me think of, for myself, it doesn't happen overnight. Just staying on that topic, I'm still working on my trauma response. That is like the immediate one, and that's fight. Like,
oh yeah, I've been there.
Like I'm still there, unfortunately, at age 39. But I give myself grace and compassion and forgiveness because I'm like, well, at least I feel okay using my voice.
Yeah, and there's different types of fight.
And I just gotta figure it out.
You know, you're just still defending yourself. And you are getting softer as you're healing. I mean, I used to be that I would curse people out in movie theaters for talking, or I was just ready to go off on people. And now I think I said to you earlier, like, I don't even think I have a fight response anymore. And I think Shay's seen that in me. Like, I'm okay. The people can disagree. People can call me out. Like, I'm okay with it. I'm not ready to fight or defend myself anymore.
Look, I'm there. So that's I'm just saying.
We're all in different places.
It doesn't happen overnight. And it doesn't mean that I'm trying to get rid of my fight response either.
Well, it doesn't mean that I won't cuss somebody out.
Right. Like, we need to have backbones, right?
Absolutely.
My yoga teacher says strong back, soft front, which means, you have that backbone, but you also still have that open heart.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just finding the need not to respond is really what it is. Like, I just find that I'm more present, and so I'm not in traumatizing situations because I'm making better choices.
And you had said something earlier, not on camera, that makes me connect it to this, and it is that oftentimes if you really sit and observe, you don't really need to respond because people are just projecting.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with you. I used to think, I think I said when we woke up, because we went out last night and had a great night, and normally I would have come home and maybe the next day, analyzed everything I said. What did I say to that person? Did I hurt their feelings? I don't do that anymore because I'm more present, so I'm more aware of what I'm saying in the moment, so I don't have those times where I have to go back and regret or wonder if I had a response. And also, I can now see other people's responses that used to offend me, like, that doesn't have anything to do with you, that's their own stuff, and that's okay. Yeah. So it's not projecting onto people and also not allowing people to project onto you.
Yes.
It's really part of the healing and just staying present.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we were going to talk about our healing practice today, which ties into this, is journaling. There's all different sorts of journaling. Sometimes people write affirmations. Sometimes people wake up and write about how their day is going to go. A meditation journaling or dream journaling. But this is more about trauma response journaling. Like maybe going back in time, when we've talked about in shadow work and inner child work, and reframing the situation. How could you have responded differently, or why did you respond that way? And maybe go through the 5 responses, the friend and the freeze and the fight and the flight and the fawn, and think of times that you can apply one of those and how you responded.
And I love the idea of what you just said. I think you said it this way, reframing. It's very real that it helps desensitize your intrusive memories if you are able to, maybe with a trained person who can guide you through this or be there with you. But there's this practice where you bring up your intrusive memories and you play it out, but you recreate the ending and you really visualize it in your brain.
Right, happening differently.
Yes, happening differently, and it desensitizes over time those memories.
Yeah,
and can help reprocess.
Because honestly, we all remember things differently. Shay and I can have the exact same experience, be the exact same place, but based on our past and our experiences, we are going to see it differently.
Well, and guess what? At that point, it's just a memory.
Right.
So who's to say we can't change our memories?
Right.
That's sometimes, as a survivor, I often tell myself that when I have my intrusive memories. I'm like, screw that. Maybe it didn't even really happen.
Right.
Not dismissing it, but just allowing myself that distance.
Yes, yeah. Because, I mean, we really don't want to continue looking in the rear view. And talk therapy is amazing for understanding some things. But even that can get to a place where if you're regurgitating the same thing over and over and over again, it's hard to move forward. And for me, like, I'm really working on forgiveness with two specific souls. And I really am having to try to reframe things because both of them had a lot of years of my life. And so I'm trying to find forgiveness for things that I never thought I could. And part of that is seeing them differently, understanding that they're flawed human beings and hurt and traumatized as well, and everybody responds differently. I think I said to someone the other day, like, we don't give credit enough to those people out there that aren't traumatized. There aren't a lot out there, but they're out there.
I think it's honestly like 1% of the world.
And they're holding it down for the rest of us that are running around like, ah! So, you know, I just think it's important for all of us to start being more present with ourselves, with our trauma, with our pasts, and understanding that we can reframe the future. We don't have to carry it around anymore.
And when we're talking about reframing your experiences that have happened, reframing as in you get to recreate or create a new ending. Like, just being very clear for that journal exercise or that meditation, you are creating the ending that you really wanted to happen.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Maybe you have that loving parent that you didn't really get to experience through childhood, and you can start to love yourself in that way. So it's a beautiful thing. And, you know, like we always say, when survivors speak,
the silence ends.
Please like, share, subscribe, all of that wonderful stuff. Comments, and thank you for taking the time to listen.
Thank you.
Namaste. And done.